Mr. Simpson, you indicated in earlier testimony that after you returned from Chicago, you decided to go over to Bob Kardashian's house and spend the night. You recall that testimony?
Yes.
Was that on the 13th or the 14th?
That was the 13th.
13th?
I believe so. Okay. No, it may have been the 14th. My days are confused. 14th.
Okay.
On the 14th.
When you got back from the police station after giving your statement, you basically stayed the rest of the day and evening of the 13th at your home. Is that true?
What was left of it, yes.
Okay. And do you recall approximately what time you got back?
It was 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Okay. And there are a number of friends that had come by. Is that true?
Yes.
And you spent much of that time watching television?
I don't know about much. I spent an hour or two, I believe, watching TV, then I went up to my bedroom. I was exhausted.
Okay. And you spent the hour or two watching various news reports, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the occasion where you heard the Avila news report on the 13th when you got back to your house?
I don't recall. It was that week, I know that, but I don't know if it was really that day or not.
Do you recall at some point hearing or learning, again, other than conversations you had with your attorneys, that the police suspected that the murderer who dropped blood at the crime scene had cut his or her left extremity?
I don't recall.
Did you ever hear that?
In court?
Was that the first time you heard that?
I don't recall.
Yeah, you recall some, strike that, you have some recollection of hearing court testimony wherein people testified that, or theorized that the killer had cut himself on the left extremity as they were leaving, because they were dripping blood as they were leaving the murder scene?
There was I think at one point that was a theory, one of the theories, yes.
Okay.
Or something to that effect. I can't tell you specifically, but I believe that was one of the theories.
And do you remember, in connection with that theory, the notion that the blood drops were located to the left of the bloody footprints?
Well, I'm going to object and instruct him not to answer. What he learned in court is irrelevant and immaterial to any issue in this case.
Well, let me just ask, have you heard that at any point?
Well, if you heard it after, no, I'm going to instruct him not to answer that.
Well, I don't think it's irrelevant because it may also explain why there's a change in his police statement. Have you heard that?
No, don't answer that.
Were you ever, strike that, did you ever think about the idea that you had cut your left finger and that there were reports that the murderer was bleeding from his left extremity as he was leaving the murder scene?
Don't answer that.
On the 13th, after you watched TV for about an hour or an hour and a half, you went upstairs. Is that right?
Yeah, whatever time it was. I don't think I used an hour and a half, but whatever time I watched TV, then I went upstairs, yes.
Okay. Do you have an estimate how long you watched TV for?
Could have been a few hours.
Do you recall people screaming at the TV or yelling at the TV upon hearing various news reports?
Yelling at the TV?
Well, saying something to the TV to the effect that that's not true or, you know, that's false, things of that nature.
People, no.
Okay. Did you hear anyone say anything in response to a news report that implied that the news report was false?
No, I can't recall.
Okay. And when you went upstairs, did you then fall asleep?
I think I was asleep and awake throughout the night, yes.
Okay. And you don't recall any discussion after you went upstairs with Ron Shipp?
No.
When you say you don't recall, is it possible you had a conversation with him and you don't recall the conversation?
Everybody, not everybody, but numerous people I recall came up to say goodnight to me, that they were leaving, and he could have been one of those people.
Okay. Do you have a recollection as you sit here today of Ron Shipp coming into your bedroom?
No.
Do you have a conversation, strike that, do you have a recollection as you sit here today of talking with Ron Shipp while you were upstairs?
No.
do you have a recollection as you sit here today of having any conversation at all with Ron Shipp as of June 13?
I knew he was there. And like everyone else, you know, they spoke to me from time to time, and I knew he was there.
Okay. Do you have a recollection as you sit here today having some conversation with Mr. Shipp?
Well, I knew he spoke to me. I knew he hugged me at one point. So I kind of recall that.
Okay. When you say he spoke to you, do you have a recollection of the subject matter of the conversation that you had?
Other than condolences and stuff like that, no.
Okay. You recall specifically Mr. Shipp extending some condolences to you?
Specifically, everybody was. So maybe I'm assuming that he did, but everybody was.
Don't assume for the purpose of my question. I want to know
Okay.
what you have a recollection of. As
Okay.
you sit here today, do you have a recollection of anything that you talked about with Ron Shipp on June 13, 1994?
Specifically what we talked about, no.
Okay. Do you recall talking to him about DNA?
No.
Do you recall talking to him about polygraphs?
No.
Do you recall talking to him about dreams that you had of killing Nicole?
No.
Do you
Well-
recall?
Go ahead.
Do you recall having any conversations at all concerning dreams?
No.
Do you recall having any conversations with Mr. Shipp at all concerning thoughts that you had about killing Nicole?
No.
With respect to the events of June 12th that we've gone through and you've gone through for some period of time, are there any periods of time for like an hour or longer where you have absolutely no memory of what you did? Where you blacked out?
You mean while I was asleep on an airplane? Or?
No, forget about sleeping, where you were awake, alert, where you believe that you may have blacked out for some reason.
Well, I know I was always awake. I don't know how alert I was, but I was certainly awake all, you know.
Okay. I'm not talking about when you're asleep. I'm just talking about, let's just take the 12th, for example. Do you recall after 6 o'clock, between 6 and 12 on June 12th, do you recall any occasions where you just blacked out for an hour, where you just don't remember what you did for a solid
For an
hour?
No, I don't think so. I think I may have, when I first got back, maybe from 2 to 5, I may have dozed once in a while, but I'm not sure because I was reading my book and the TV was on and I may have dozed during that period of time.
In the 5 years before Nicole's death, do you recall any occasions where you became so angry with her or under any circumstances where you simply blacked out a particular event?
No.
Has that ever happened to you in any context where you have lost your memory for an appreciable period of time?
You can answer it within a 5-year span.
Yeah,
Other
within a
than that,
5-year span.
Within a 5-year span?
Yeah.
No, not within a 5-year span, no.
Well, has that ever happened?
Well, don't answer that. That's too remote to be of any.
Well, say within 10 years.
Don't answer that.
10 years, no.
Don't answer that.
Oh, sorry.
You are a potted plant.
Well, why is that irrelevant? And he's implying that there may be some,
He answered the-
some loss of memory. He has a systemic condition that somehow causes him to have memory loss or blackouts.
Really?
Yes.
Thank you, doctor. Thank
Well,
you very
that's what I'm
much. The
asking.
last time I heard you got a medical degree would be the next time, and he's not going to answer the question.
Let me ask it this way. Do you have, to your knowledge, any medical condition that causes you to have memory loss?
No.
Do you have any medical conditions that you're aware of that causes you to have a diminished capacity to recall significant events?
A medical condition that I have? No.
Did you sleep the entire evening of the 13th into the 14th, as best you recall?
Other than what he just testified to you, that he was awake and asleep and awake and asleep.
I was awake and asleep and awake and asleep. No.
Did you have any conversations with anyone on the morning, say between 12 o'clock p.m. and 6 o'clock a.m. on the between the 13th and 14th?
I don't know what you mean by 12 o'clock p.m. You mean midnight and 6 a.m.?
Yeah. Very good.
Conversations, no. My sister, I may have had a word with my sister during that period of time, but it wouldn't have been a conversation.
Okay. Didn't talk to anyone on the telephone?
No.
The following day, on the 14th, you've already described a trip that you took with Mr. Kardashian to get your golf clubs, right?
Well, he described the trip. And
During
they
the
got
course
his
of the
golf club.
trip, we also got, during the course of driving around, we did pick up my golf club.
Okay. I'm not going to go back through it. I just want to highlight the fact that you've already testified about that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what else you did that day? That, no, not just strike that. Do you recall what time you left Kardashian's house
When?
on the morning of the 14th?
Left Kardashian's house in the morning of the 14th?
Well, did you leave from Kardashian's house on the morning of the 14th or your house to go get the golf clubs?
Well, he didn't leave from either house.
14. No. No. No is the answer.
Where did you meet up with Mr. Kardashian on the 14th?
At my house.
Okay. Did you leave from your house with him?
Yes.
And was that when you went to Nicole's and then ultimately went down and got the golf clubs?
No.
Okay. Where did you go initially?
My office.
And then you went from your office to?
Well, when we left my office, we were waiting for my kids, and we drove by Nicole's.
Okay. And then you went to the airport?
Well, then we drove, and then during the course of driving around, we did stop at the airport, yes.
And then did you go back to Kardashian's?
Yes.
Okay. Did you spend the rest of the day there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go anywhere else that day?
No.
Okay. You slept there that evening?
Yes.
Were you here the first 5 days?
Is that a question, statement?
I think you're being an asshole.
That's two of you.
You bet.
Now, going to the 15th, you saw Dr. Huizenga for an examination, right?
I believe so.
Okay. And when you saw Dr. Huizenga for an examination, did you fill out a history?
I believe so.
Okay. And did you also have any x-rays taken?
I don't recall.
You mentioned earlier you thought you had some blood withdrawn?
Yes.
And that was the same day as the wake on the 15th? Correct.
I believe so.
Now, after the murder of Nicole, you made an offer, a public offer of $500,000, I believe, for any information leading to the arrests or identities of individuals involved in the murders. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you recall when you first made that offer?
No.
Is that something that you came up with on your own?
Don't answer that. We're not going to get any more questions about that. Or you can get all the questions you want. He's not going to answer them.
Okay. Do you recall how information was processed in connection with this offer?
Don't answer that.
Do you know whether anyone called in with information that implicated you in the murders?
Don't answer that.
Do you know whether anyone called in with information that implicated anyone else in the murders?
Don't answer that.
Do you know whether any information has been stored or preserved relative to leads or information that came in?
Don't answer that.
On what grounds, Mr. Baker?
It's irrelevant material to any issue in this case.
Okay. Irrelevancy?
You're not taking my depo.
I just want to know the basis for your objection. When Mr. Kalin testified at his deposition, he described a process where you and he went to the one of you went to the eastern portion of the pathway or in that direction, and the other to the western portion of the pathway to look back behind you. Do you recall that?
No.
Do you recall any occasion on the 12th where you and Mr. Kalin agreed that you would go around to the pathway and look down there to see what was the source of the noises that he described to you?
Yeah, I recall us talking about that. Me making that suggestion, that is.
You made that suggestion?
I believe so.
Do you recall ever actually moving towards, making any affirmative effort to move towards the pathway to look down to see whether you could determine the origin of the noises that he described?
I tried at one point when I was coming back from the Bronco. I did look, but it was dark, and that's when we talked about getting a flashlight.
This is when you went out to the Bronco?
Yeah, I was coming back, and I guess they were talking about flashlights at the time.
Okay, just so my question is on the record, this is when you went out to the Bronco to get the telephone case?
Yes.
And then on your way back, you went over and made some effort to look up the pathway?
No, as I was walking back, I can see it was dark there. And I said, well, you go one way and I'll go around the other way. It was, at the time, yes. I said, you go one way and I'll go the other way. And that's when he made a comment about flashlights. And that's what initiated all the flashlight stuff.
Okay, going inside and looking for the flashlight?
Yeah.
And after that, other than making a comment, did you ever then go to either side of the pathway to look down to see whether you could determine the origin of the noises that he...
We never found a flashlight, and I had to go.
Did you make 2 trips to the Bronco at the time that the limo was in the driveway?
No.
Just 1 trip?
Yes.
Okay. And this was on the trip back from the Bronco, so we're clear, right?
When I was coming back from the Bronco, he was standing, they were like in the front there. I can't tell you exactly where they were. Cato was still talking about going around the side. And as I was coming back, I was talking to him, and I said something about you go one way and I'll go the other way. And that's when I became aware that there was a real flashlight problem.
Okay. And then after you went through the flashlight episode, trying to locate a flashlight, you came out and got into the limousine.
Got directly in the limo.
The 89 incident that you've described in some detail during the course of this deposition, you indicated that that altercation, or the wrestling as you've described it, was basically an effort on your part to get Nicole out of the bedroom. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Did you ever wrestle her in an attempt to get her out of the house?
No, she actually ran out of the house. No, I didn't wrestle her to get her out of the house.
Okay. There were a couple episodes where she came into the bedroom and you wrestled and got her out, and then she came back in and you wrestled to get her out again. Is that correct?
There was one episode of that.
There's only one?
Yeah, she went out and I locked the door at one point, but she got a key and got in.
Okay. Did the altercation start inside the bedroom?
Yeah, it started with me. I was in bed and she came to the bed.
Okay. Did it start with a conversation and escalate to an argument and escalate further to an altercation?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know a conversation, but it pretty much started off as an argument.
Just started right off with somebody arguing?
Yeah.
Okay. Did she start it?
Yes.
And you got her out initially by
Eventually.
wrestling. She came back in, and then you got her out again. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said at all.
Okay. How am I wrong?
She went out, I locked the door. She evidently went downstairs and got a key and came back in. And that's when the wrestling portion,
I
the
see.
physical portion began.
I see. And then the wrestling was basically inside your bedroom then?
Yes.
And then you eventually were able to get her outside of the bedroom?
Yes.
Did you lock the door?
Yes.
And then you have some understanding that she left the house at that point?
I saw her leave the house.
Okay. How did you see her leave the house?
I came downstairs at one point because my alarm went blank, and she was smoking a cigarette at the back door. And when she saw me, she went out back.
When your alarm went blank, what do you mean by that?
You know, if a door or something is open, it goes blank, no color at all. Green if it's off and not engaged. Red if it's engaged, and nothing if there's a door open or something.
So if the alarm, was it deactivated?
Yeah.
I mean, she
Yeah.
pushed in the code and deactivated the alarm?
I don't know, but there was a door open somewhere. Something was open somewhere, and the alarm signal showed that.
Well, what I'm trying to find out is, was the door open during the period where the alarm was activated, or was the alarm deactivated and then the door was...
I don't recall. I just know that when I noticed that there was a door open somewhere.
Doesn't your alarm have an audible noise that is made if there's a door open during an activated period?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear any noises?
No, as I said, I looked at one point and saw that there was a door open somewhere.
Okay. And then you went downstairs, and that's when you saw her leave?
Well, she saw me, and she was smoking a cigarette, and then she ran out the back door.
Okay. Were you coming towards her when she ran out the back door?
When I saw her, I wasn't really coming towards her. I was just trying to observe things. And when she went out the back door, I went upstairs and got a robe, and then I came out and went out the back door.
As you were coming towards her downstairs, were you just walking towards her?
As I told you, when I saw her, she went out the back door, and I went upstairs and got a robe. Then I came back downstairs and went out the back door.
Before she left the back door, did you say anything to her?
No.
Were you yelling at her?
No.
And when she went outside, you went upstairs and got your robe and came back downstairs?
Yes.
Did you have any further altercation outside?
No, I didn't see her outside.
Do you know whether she slipped and fell outside?
She wouldn't have at that point, because when I did see her, she didn't have mud on her.
I'm sorry?
She wouldn't have at that point, because I never saw her with mud on her until I saw the pictures.
Okay. Do you know how she got the mud on her that you indicated was depicted in the photographs?
I know what was told later,
What's your understanding of what?
that when she was running out of Michelle's room, she fell.
Did you ever see her go to Michelle's room?
I saw her in Michelle's room.
Okay. And did you see her run from Michelle's room?
Yes.
Did you see her fall?
No.
Do you know where she fell or where she allegedly fell?
No.
During any of the wrestling that you were engaged in on during the '89 incident, did you ever take her face and push it into a wall?
No.
Did you ever push it into a door?
No.
Did you ever take her face and push it into the floor?
No.
Was the altercation that you had with her always on a carpet?
Well, it's only carpet in that. Well, in her, I believe so. I don't know if we got into her bathroom at all, because as you get to the door, she has a hard floor there. But yeah, there's carpet throughout the house, I would think so.
Do you recall any of the altercation occurring on that hard floor that you've described?
No. No, it could have, could not have. I really don't recall.
Do you know, strike that, do you have any information that any of the bruises that were apparent after the '89 incident were self-inflicted by Nicole?
No.
And you've indicated on a number of occasions that you have taken responsibility for those bruises, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you mean by that statement that you've taken responsibility that you caused them?
If I caused them or if they happened when she fell, I think I was the genesis of it all. So if it happened anywhere, I take responsibility for it.
Do you have any information that any bruise on her face was caused when she fell?
No.
Do you know if she struck her face when she fell?
No.
Was she on the grass or the driveway when she fell?
I don't know. I didn't see.
Have you ever seen any reports or information wherein she described her location when she fell?
No.
When the police came in connection with the '89 incident, you spoke with the police officer, right?
Yes.
Did you believe at the time that you spoke with the police officer that there was a possibility you were going to be arrested?
No.
Did you believe that at the time you spoke with the police officer you may have committed a crime?
No.
You had no idea?
Correct.
While you were strike that, while the police officer was present at Rockingham, you got in your car and left. Is that true?
Correct.
Did you tell the police officer that you were leaving?
No.
Did you leave because you wanted to avoid being arrested?
No.
Did the police officer ever indicate to you that you were going to be arrested?
Absolutely not.
Did he ever indicate to you that you were going to be questioned?
No.
Did he ever indicate to you a desire to have you come down to the police department to provide further information relative to this incident?
No.
Did you ask permission to leave?
No.
Did you ask if the police officer had completed his investigation before you got in your vehicle, decided to drive away?
No.
Do you know whether any police cars followed you after you left?
I doubt it, but I don't know.
As you left the Rockingham residence, did you drive normal speeds?
Yes.
Were you driving in an effort to try to evade anyone that was trying to follow you?
No.
Where did you go from there?
To a friend's house,
Who's the friend?
Alan Schwartz.
Now, fast forwarding a bit to the '93 incident with Mr. Slamowicz.
It's too late.
Huh?
It's too late to fast forward to anything.
On the '93 incident, you indicated that you were you went over to Nicole's unannounced. Is that true?
And what?
'93, October 25th, 1993.
No, that's wrong.
I'm sorry. Backing up with the Keith Slamowicz. Then I'm talking about the 911 call. Earlier, when you went over to Nicole's, where Keith Slamowicz was present, you went over there unannounced. Is that true?
No.
Did you call and let her know you were coming?
You're totally confused. I don't ever recall Keith Salamowicz being anywhere near Nicole's house in 1993.
No, I changed that. I said I was incorrect.
May of
I'm
92,
backing up.
Director Green.
Pardon me?
He's talking May of 92, Director Green.
Okay, so what's the question?
You went over to her house unannounced.
Yes.
Okay. And when you got there, can you describe the pathway up to her front door?
It's a pathway. You walk up the driveway, you turn right a little bit, then you turn left and walk to her front door.
Okay. And can you describe where the front window is in relationship to that pathway?
Front window is around the front that faces the street.
To enter the front of the house, would you ordinarily enter the pathway that you just described?
Yes.
And you'd ring the bell or knock on the door?
Yes, I'll go around back.
Okay. And if you entered in the front, as you just described, would you be able, from the pathway, to look into the front window inside her house?
You could, but you couldn't see much looking in the front window.
Okay. Would you have to make some affirmative effort to go around and look inside the window to see inside the
To
house?
see the whole bit, the room, I would think so.
Did you have to do that in order to see her and Mr. Slamowicz that evening?
No.
How were you able to see them?
I walked by this window, which is in the front of her house, but it's not one of her front windows. It's walks right along the path. As you approach the front door, it's about 6 feet from the front door, and you can see right into the living room.
So you were walking on the pathway or towards the pathway to enter in the front door?
I was on the pathway, approaching the front door, when I saw her head, and I looked and saw that she was obviously engaged.
Okay. And you were able to see that without making any affirmative effort to look inside the window?
True, yes.
Okay. Just normally walking towards the front door as if to ring the bell or knock on the door?
Yes.
And did you ever take a different position to get a better look at what she was doing?
Once I saw her head, I stepped towards and saw that she was obviously engaged, and then I left.
When you say
It wasn't
step,
something I wanted to look at.
when you say step towards, you made a movement towards the window?
Yes.
Did you have to step off the path?
No.
Did you step to the edge of the path?
No. No, this is all on the path.
Okay. Did you step towards the window to get a better look inside?
Yeah, to see what was going on.
Okay. And when you saw her head, what was it about her head that caused you to move more towards the window to get a better look inside?
Nothing. I just saw her, and I looked and then saw that she was engaged.
Well, when you first saw her head, could you tell what she was doing?
No.
Okay, so you just saw that she was home inside the...
Yeah, it was a spontaneous thing. It wasn't like, you're not talking about a lot of time here. You know, it's like if you're walking, sometimes I would have, if she was just sitting there, I would have hit the glass, and she would have, I wouldn't have had to, I didn't want to ring the doorbell. I didn't want to wake anybody. So if she was just sitting there, I would have hit the glass and she would have come and opened the door. But when I looked and I saw she wasn't just sitting there, I left.
And you just looked in there for a matter of seconds?
Yes.
Your relationship with Mr. Kardashian, he has been a friend of yours for a number of years, is that true?
Yes.
And you indicated that a number of years ago you had actually utilized his legal services, is that true?
Yes.
And that was How long ago, approximately?
I don't know, years previous to this.
Okay. And as of June 12, 1994, was he one of your best friends?
He wasn't a guy I saw often, but if I had to list best friends, I would have listed him in my list of best friends, yes.
He's someone that you saw socially?
Yeah, from time to time, like I may have seen him twice in the previous year.
Okay. Did you have any business relationships with him?
In our life together, yes.
In the last 5 years before Nicole's death, did you have any business relationship with Mr. Kardashian?
I don't believe so, no.
After June 12, 1994, at some point, did you consult with Mr. Kardashian in a professional capacity?
Almost immediately.
Okay. And when you say almost immediately, when was the first time you ever contacted Mr. Kardashian with a view towards either asking him something or telling him something that you considered to be within the context of an attorney-client relationship?
I didn't have to contact him. He came to the house, and I know I don't want to discuss what I talked about him on the 13th, but I kind of relied on him a little bit from that point on.
Okay. The first time you talked with him was on the 13th?
No, I talked to him, I'm sure, on the 12th that night, but I wasn't in much of a mood to have conversations. I mean, 12th. I mean, the 13th. It wasn't really like, I know we had made arrangements to go to his house. We may have made arrangements that we may have done it the next morning. I'm not totally sure. But I think I was just a person who was reacting to things on the 13th. And then on the 14th, I know specifically, you know, I sort of asked for his help, and he was there for me.
When you say on the 14th, you know specifically you sort of asked for his help.
Yeah.
Are you referencing some discussion you had with Mr. Kardashian that was within the context of an attorney-client communication?
As I know it to be now, yes.
Okay. Well, how about at that point? Not now, but on the 14th, when you talked to Mr. Kardashian, were you talking to him with a view towards either telling him something that you consider to be confidential?
Well, that's a legal conclusion. Don't answer that.
Well, his state of mind is relevant. Were you consulting Mr. Kardashian on the 14th as a lawyer?
Well, I knew he was a lawyer, and I wanted his view on a few things,
Okay.
and he was there
All
for
right.
me.
And that was the context of that discussion on the 14th?
Yes.
Your knowledge that he was a lawyer and your desire to have some of his information or knowledge?
Yeah, for him to help me with, you know, determining some things.
Okay. Now, on the 13th, did you see Mr. Kardashian at your house?
I believe so, but I really don't remember, but I believe so.
Okay. And did you have any conversations with him at all while he was at your house on the 13th?
If he was there, I would have, but I just don't recall.
Okay. And on the 13th, do you recall, for example, having any discussions with Mr. Kardashian about luggage?
No.
Do you recall having any discussion with Mr. Kardashian on the 13th with respect to your whereabouts on June 12, 1994?
No.
Do you recall having any discussions with Mr. Kardashian on the 13th concerning your possible involvement in the deaths of Ron Goldman and Nicole Simpson?
No.
Did you know whether Mr. Kardashian was a licensed lawyer in the state of California at the time that you spoke with him on the 14th in connection with seeking legal advice?
I assumed he was.
On the 13th, when you spoke with Mr. Kardashian, did you have any discussions whatsoever that relate to the facts and circumstances of Nicole's death?
As I told you, I don't recall if I spoke to him on the 13th.
You have no recollection at all as you sit here today speaking with Mr. Kardashian one way or the other?
One way or the other. Yeah.
Do you recall at some point terminating the attorney-client relationship you had with Mr. Kardashian in connection with this
Don't
case?
answer that.
Well, do you still consult with Mr. Kardashian in connection with this case?
Don't answer that.
Have you communicated with Mr. Kardashian in connection with this case in the last 2 weeks
Don't answer.
as an attorney seeking information from him as an attorney?
Don't answer that.
Have you sought the legal services of Mr. Kardashian with respect to any other matter other than this case since June 12, 1994?
This case being which case? The civil case, the criminal case, the facts surrounding
you won't
the
let me ask about any of this. I'm just, the whole case, meaning the,
Okay.
both cases that relate to the death of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. Other than any work that he did in connection with this case for you and any conversations or communications you had in connection with this case, have you had any other opportunities wherein you have retained him since June 12, 1994?
I don't understand the question. I don't understand the question.
Okay. I want to set aside any legal relationship you had with Mr. Kardashian arising out of the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. My question is, since June 12, 1994, have you retained Mr. Kardashian in connection with any other matters?
Retain, I've not paid him a retainer. I have relied on him on some issues that stem from this case.
Okay.
And yes.
I want to exclude those. Okay.
Or other issues that exclude.
Exactly. I want to exclude all issues that relate to this case.
My whole life has been issues relating to this case since it's been over, and there's been numerous things, and some of the things that Bob has been an advisor on.
And those items are related to this case?
They're ancillary things to this case.
Is there anything that you would...
Not to any criminal or civil prosecution. There are things, other things.
Okay. Is there anything that you would consider to be separate and distinct from this case or ancillary issues related to this case wherein you have retained the services of Mr. Kardashian or spoke with him in an effort to obtain legal advice?
Outside of this case?
Yes.
My life has been this case, so I haven't talked to virtually anybody about any other thing. So the answer would be, I don't know what the answer would be because I don't know what the question was again.
Other than this case or ancillary issues related to this case, have you had any discussions with Mr. Kardashian seeking his legal counsel concerning any other matters?
No.
You indicated in an earlier examination that you had discussed or denied your involvement in the murders with Mr. Callings. Do you recall?
Say again?
You had testified in an earlier examination that in a discussion with Mr. Callings you had denied any involvement in these murders. Do you recall that?
I don't recall discussing that here.
Have you ever had a discussion with Mr. Callings concerning whether you were involved in any way in the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson?
I don't recall.
You had discussions with Rosie Greer while you were in jail, is that correct?
Correct.
And when was the first time that you ever spoke with him?
What do you mean, in my life?
No, after these murders.
Was in jail.
Do you remember the date?
No.
Prior to June 12, 1994, did you ever attend any services where Mr. Greer, Reverend Greer, was a minister or pastor?
No.
Did you have a church that you regularly attended?
Regularly?
Sure.
Semi-occasionally, yeah.
Okay. And where was that?
St. Martin's in Brentwood.
And as part of your religious beliefs, does that include periodic confessions?
I'm not Catholic, no.
Okay. What religious affiliation would you assign to yourself, if any?
Baptist.
And as part of being a Baptist, does that include any process where you go through a confessional?
No.
You don't give confession as part of your ordinary religious services then?
That's correct.
Do you know what religious affiliation Reverend Greer is?
I think he's almost non-denomination. I think he's a guy who preaches the message to just about anyone. I can't say anyone that listens. I know he speaks a lot. He travels a lot and speaks a lot.
As you sit here today, do you have any understanding with respect to whether he has any affiliation with a recognized religion?
I think his affiliation, I believe he has some credentials. I've never asked him about those, but I think in court that came out. I believe his affiliation is with the Lord through Jesus Christ, and that's what he preaches.
Okay, is that the name of the religion, or is that just how he interacts with the people that he sees, that he is somebody who is talking to them through the Lord Jesus Christ?
Well, I think anyone who has any religion in their life knows that the Lord Jesus Christ is Christianity, so I think that would be the name of the religion.
Do you know whether Reverend Greer, as part of his religious affiliation, has, as part of it, confessions?
No.
And in fact, the only recognized, in fact, you don't know of a recognized religion that he is affiliated with. Is that a fair statement, as you sit here?
No, I just told you he's affiliated with Christianity, the Lord Jesus Christ is what he's affiliated with.
What I mean is Baptist, Episcopalian, Catholicism, something.
Christianity is what it is. And I believe, even though I was raised Baptist, that's the way I see it also.
When did you first learn of Reverend Greer's religious affiliation? Was it before or after he came to your jail cell?
Before.
And in the course of talking with Reverend Greer, did you give him, did he have a confession for you?
No, the only thing we talked about was our belief in the Lord Jesus Christ. There was nothing to confess except my belief in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay. And what I mean by confess, I'm not necessarily about confessing to committing murders, but having a confession where you absolve yourself of sins as a part of this experience with Reverend Greer.
That's not his religion or mine, for that matter.
When you would meet with Reverend Greer, would you always do so in the same place?
No.
Would you meet in your jail cell?
No.
Where would you meet?
In the various attorney rooms.
Would there always be a guard present?
I mean, not that I could see, but I know there's one in the vicinity, yes.
So during any strike, at all times when you were meeting with Reverend Greer, you had knowledge that there would be a deputy in close proximity to where you were meeting?
Yes.
And were there any walls or doors, to your knowledge, that separated the location of this guard that you knew about from you and Reverend Greer?
A wall, yes. Glass wall.
During any of these occasions where you spoke with Reverend Greer while you were in jail, did you ever actually see the guard standing there as you were having a discussion?
Yes.
Was that the exception rather than the rule?
Well, standing would have been an exception, but seated guard, standing and or sitting would have been the rule.
Okay, so generally speaking, you would have some visual contact with the guard as you were communicating with Reverend Greer?
Yes, it was difficult, but you can see him.
And after you had completed your discussions with Reverend Greer, would you then tell the guard that you were done?
He would.
Reverend Greer?
Yes.
How would he do that?
He'd knock on the glass.
And then what would he say?
I don't know.
Did you believe that when you were communicating with Reverend Greer that your communications were private?
I probably didn't give it any thought.
Did it matter to you whether they were private or not?
Me personally?
Yes.
No.
So the fact that a guard was sitting there and possibly could hear your communications didn't matter to you?
To me, it didn't, no.
And was that because you didn't consider the communications to be confidential?
I don't know what I can consider them to be. I just never thought they can hear. I could hear them. I could hear them in the hall. I assumed they could hear me.
Okay. So when you say I could hear them, you're talking about the guards or deputies?
Yes.
You could hear them talking?
Yeah.
And you assumed that given the fact that you could hear them, that they could hear you as you were talking with Reverend Greer?
Yes.
Okay. And
I assumed that we were being bugged, so I assumed that also, but that was an assumption.
so is that true? You assumed that you were being bugged?
At all times, yes.
Okay. And so then I take it that at all times while you were having discussions with Reverend Greer, you didn't assume that any of those discussions were confidential?
I assumed that they were bugging us.
I'm going to change the tape. We'll go off the record here for a minute.
This is the end of tape number 2 of volume 8. The time is approximately 3:36, and we are off the record.
Mr. Simpson, on June 17th, while you were inside your Bronco, did you ever speak with your mother by cellular phone?
I think I tried to, but I'm not sure.
As you sit here today, do you have a recollection of talking with her?
No.
Where's the crescendo? We got to ask him the Rosie question. Come on. Come on. You can't waste 30 minutes on that.
They were giving you the bait. Swallow it. I like my Mercury Morris line of questions. That went real far, didn't it?
No, the better one was Sugar Ray
Oh, no,
Robinson.
Sugar Ray Robinson.
The same trip where you were in the Bronco heading to Nicole's grave, you indicated there was a police car blocking the entrance. You recall that?
Yes.
Was it a police car or some type of security service that was blocking the entrance?
I don't know.
Do you know the police department,
No.
if there was one?
No.
Did you speak with your children from your Chicago hotel room on June 13th?
No.
Positive
No.
about that?
I know.
Okay. Sydney and Justin.
I don't believe so.
Okay, when you say you don't believe so, do you have some recollection that you may have?
No.
Okay, you're fairly certain you did not speak with Sydney and Justin from your Chicago hotel room on the 13th?
Pretty certain, yes.
And did you call, on the way back from Chicago, someone by the name of Jonah Wilson?
Yes.
Did you speak with Jonah Wilson?
I don't recall.
What was your purpose in calling Jonah Wilson?
I was looking for my daughter.
Do you recall speaking with Arnell at Jonah Wilson's house?
I don't recall.
You have no recollection of talking with Jonah Wilson on the way back from Chicago then as you sit here today. Is that true?
Yes.
And you have no recollection of talking with Arnell at Jonah Wilson's house as you sit here today. Is that true?
I mean, coming back from Chicago?
Yes, on the
No, I don't have a
airport.
recollection of that, no. I may have, but I don't have a recollection.
Does Christian Reichard presently live with you?
No.
Has he stayed at your house on occasion the last couple months?
No.
He's been there, is that true?
Yes.
Taking golf.
Swinging golf clubs in the front yard with
He
you?
did one day. Yeah.
I know, I saw it on TV.
Say it, Mr. Rosa.